Welcome, thank you guys for coming out. My name is Josh Kuhn. I teach here in the Annenberg School and I direct the Popular Music Project for the Lear Center. For those of you who don't know what the Popular Music Project is, we're a kind of one-stop interdisciplinary home for people who love to talk about popular music in any language that makes sense to you, which means campus community, it means LA community, and we work really hard to try to use popular music as a way to create a bridge between the way that students and faculty think about, talk about, and teach popular music, and the way that people in the music industry, musicians, and music fans across the city of LA talk about popular music, which is often the same way and often not the same way. So we try to find nice moments to bring people together to talk about things. And one of the things that we do every year is we have a distinguished LA music person in residence, and that music person can take all sorts of different
We're still trying to find him.
Yes, we are. So in his stead, we have Raymond Roker, who is joining us as our distinguished artist in residence this year. We're really, really thrilled to have him here. And what we're going to do over the course of this academic year, we've assembled so far a working group of undergraduate and graduate students, many of whom are here tonight, who are going to be working with Raymond this fall really on a kind of woodshedding, intellectual think tank, idea bouncing series of sessions that will include some blogging on the herb.com site. And this is a working group that has been established but is still taking its shape. So if there are people who would like to join that group who are not already in it, please let me know at the end of the event tonight. And then in the spring, all of the talking and woodshedding and great ideas and thinking, we'll try to actually stop those and see what they mean and see how we might actually put them together to produce something. What would it be? One of the things that we're talking about, maybe we'll talk about a little bit tonight, is what would a new kind of new model of app, music magazine publishing look like? How would we conceive of what that app would be? What would the content be? How do we research that content, et cetera, et cetera. So the goal with this particular residency is to have plenty of thinking and researching, and then plenty of actually practical, hands-on kind of building of something. And we'll see how that goes. So I think that's all I need to say, and we're going to turn it over to Raymond. I invited him here to do this tonight purely as a kind of get-to-know-you session, so he could introduce himself personally and professionally to you all. He's a very interesting arc of a career that right now this whole workshop is built around the kind of real-time envisioning of next steps for all of us together. So I think it's an exciting thing. So please join me in welcoming Raymond Roker to USC Annenberg.
So it's going to get personal.
Yes, it better get personal.
It will be personal. So I wanted to, well, thanks, Josh, appreciate that. I wanted to just give you some background of who I am and kind of where up to maybe around the point as far as personal to your age or your ages, and kind of my college years. And then post-college was the magazine, so I'll take you a little bit into some of the mag and show you some of the covers and use those as jumping off points. So a little bit of background on myself. I was a typical biracial, half Jewish, Bahamian born, New Orleans raised, single mom having kid. Very normal. This is my childhood in New Orleans. We moved from the Bahamas and I was there until I was about 12 years old, and then came to Los Angeles, and pretty much from there I was a Hollywood kid. These are all me. These are not stand-ins, stock art, or anything, okay? So, good, but not a Boy Scout, except technically I was a Boy Scout. But I had a definitely colorful childhood with getting into some trouble, and especially in my teenage years. Definitely DJing at a fairly early stage. This was probably in college years. I was jumping on I would show up with my friend's house who had a DJ rig, and this was back when everything was kind of like, you know, traveling party circuit DJs and whatnot, and I just insisted that he show me how to mix, and I wish I had some of those old mixtapes, because, like, you know, LL Cool J and some hip house and everything kind of montaging together, and to even take it further back, this was back when the DJing career was probably getting its initial seeds. See how embarrassing this is going to get? I was always into art. My graffiti history was pretty much from high school. I think graffiti in some ways introduced me to music. I mean, obviously I was into music, but it introduced me to hip-hop because hip-hop was around, you know, when I was in high school, of course, but it was not something that was so ubiquitous that everybody was into it or everybody knew it was up. And then graffiti was like my entree to hip-hop culture, and through that I jumped into really appreciating where hip-hop music was coming from, DJing and all that. I went to school, college-wise, I went to school right down the street, LA Trade Tech. It's nothing fancy, but you know, it taught me a lot, gave me the real foundation in terms of, I learned commercial art, I learned design, I learned how you approach a problem aesthetically, and I learned how to do it, you know, without all the tools that the Art Center kids had that I, you know, envied, but you know, it was not out of my league. So after I got out of junior college, pretty much got a job and decided that I was going to start a magazine. So this is me in my first apartment in Hollywood. You're welcome to comment on the fashion, any thoughts you have. Well, the whole thing is that all this has all come back, so this could have been this year, but so I was in a one-bedroom apartment. That picture, if you would expand it out, you wouldn't see much more. I mean, that was it. The bed was like in a little cubby hole, and I started the magazine on a Apple computer, and I've been a Mac person ever since, but it was, you know, it was definitely grassroots. It was me and just some friends that wanted to help me out. My partner faded after the first issue. He went and got married and got distracted, but Herb was something that I had thought up with him, and he helped launch it, and then I kind of carried it on. So I launched it with $3,000 that I had saved up from doing graffiti murals. I paint stuff for Hollywood and do commercials and things like that. And you know, it's really funny. I just saw The Social Network, which I'm sure half of you have seen already. To think that 10 years later he would start Facebook with $1,000 kind of puts my investment to shame, you know, because I really didn't get the payoff that he did. And then to think about what you could do today, I mean, for $100 you can start a media company. I mean, you get a domain, and you get a, you know, maybe you get a Tumblr theme for $50, and you're on your way. So it really is amazing. I thought this was a small threshold to cross over in order to get into the business of doing something, but today it's a pretty incredible. This is Herb was a very enticing enterprise for people because there was nothing around at the time in the early 90s in LA, and we brought a lot of great folks in to you know, some of the folks in the picture. I should let you guess, but in the bottom on the left, the guy on the phone is on the radio every morning. Morning Becomes Eclectic. Yes, that is Jason Bentley in like 1992, and I will definitely tell him after this that I showed this photo. Call up tomorrow and tease him.
I see Jeff Chang.
Jeff Chang is above me. DJ Zen at the time. He went on, and I'm sure he's spoken at this school. He's known, really great guy. I'm still in touch with him. Above him is Todd Roberts. He went on to start or help start the Daily Swarm. The guy to the right with the hat is Tomas Palermo, who was our reggae editor at the time, and he was the Accelerator editor for a number of years. He finally bounced from that. So this is like in the first office, so this is like within the first 5-6 years in the mag. You know, this was a different time for hip-hop. It was a different time for everything. Innocence, I was meeting these rap stars for like the first time. It was pretty amazing. This is when I still had my day job. Which dates me because you can see the Step Into Arena CD on the table there. I was at a One Stop, which kind of sold wholesale music, but meeting Gangstar out in front of my apartment. Everything was kind of simple in the 90s doing it. We were definitely, this is not me, we were definitely kind of defiant, you know, in that first 10 years. This is Ash. He started a company called Con Art. It's still around. This is actually Slash's younger brother. But he was one of my first advertisers. We made these shirts with the censorship asterisk, and actually that was the back cover ad of the first issue. And I remember a client, a music label at the time, saying, "Great magazine. You know, you can never do that ad ever again. Like you got it out of your system. That's great, first issue, but you know, you'll have to learn the rules of the road." But then again, we also, during that time, even we were accused of kind of being sellouts. This is an early flyer that was posted around in the record stores talking about all the sellout companies in the 90s, including us, and Fresh Jive, and taking the underground scene. And it's funny, 20 years later, still those people that, get in Facebook comments and talk about how everybody's a sellout. We started a movement. Obviously, we were part of this movement of club kids that in the top you have kids from like the early 90s, and then this is just Electric Daisy Carnival, several months back. And I really would almost more equate those kids at the top to the hipsters of today, but I didn't have a good hipster shot. But it's definitely, the continuum was, these are the ravers of yesterday and the ravers of today. And interestingly enough, some of the problems in the community, this is a 1999 cover that we did called Are We Too High? And this headline I could have literally just used this: the why law enforcement and the media scrutinize rave culture, talking about the drugs in the scene, people that are too young, getting in trouble, this whole kind of the music scene itself bringing upon its own issues. And so I know you know about the situation that happened at Electric Daisy, but I started digging out these old issues and saying, we really kind of had these discussions 10 years ago, and it's amazing that, here we are, we're having the exact same ones. Our mantra was paper, ink, and soul. This is how we approach things. This is an old newsprint issue. This was the issue that we made when I went to New Music Seminar, which was like an early, kind of a South by Southwest Winter Music Conference type thing in Manhattan in the early 90s. Pretty much quit the job, went out there with this first issue, and never looked back as far as a full-time job. But we had issues, so let me take you through some of the covers. This cover was evidence of the way that we approached music culture, because it was really everything that emanated out from music culture was important to us, especially in the West Coast. And this was right after the LA riots, and we actually did this very good story, or deep piece on the truce, and I went down to Imperial Courts housing projects, dropped off copies of these magazines to one of the organizers of the truce. I mean, it was like we were really entrenched in everything that was going on in music and culture at the time, and it really kind of set the stage that we would never really just be about music, or not talk about politics, or not talk about culture in any kind of a deep way. This is a 2001 cover with Daft Punk. I know that Daft Punk had their really blowout moment in, I think, 2007 or so at Coachella, 2006 maybe, yeah. But this is one of the seminal electronic acts that we had put on the cover, years before they would come into the mainstream. This is a little more recent, 2007, with Mark Ronson and Lily Allen. We did a whole kind of future of music issue. You can kind of get a sense of the type of stuff we talked about. This is a photo issue we did, I think it's 99, and Chemical Brothers were gracing that. It was one of we did several photo issues over the years. Oops. This is Fatboy Slim, 1998. And we had two covers, the same issue. The other one was Black Star, which was Mos Def and Talib Kweli. This is our 10-year anniversary issue. We did three covers: Moby, De La Soul, and Prodigy. And we kind of did a whole issue dedicated to just like a timeline for the first 10 years of the magazine and of culture and the music movements. We were very instrumental in the whole drum and bass scene. We went kind of jungle crazy from 1996 to 2001 or so, and followed every drum and bass artist. This was when Ronnie Size's album came out. This is when you still got tapes. First of all, it wasn't like you didn't even get a CD advance. You got an actual cassette advance, and it was an interesting thing because when I heard that advance of New Forms, the album, their first album, I was probably only one of 20 people in the U.S. that had heard it, and this was at a time where not everything spread just instantly. So it was a very kind of interesting dynamic back then when magazines really were the gatekeepers, and if I shared that music, I was sharing something that you really could not get except through those pages. This is in the 2000s. We started to expand in terms of the music coverage, we weren't just about hip-hop and electronic music. We started, but you could argue the TV on the radio is electronic music to an extent, but we definitely got into more rock. But we tried to always do things that were true to Herb. You know, this is rock with soul. This is rock that didn't look like a typical indie band. This was a really kind of shifting cover for us because Carlos D, the former bassist now of Interpol, this was in 2004, and we had not really done. I had been very against us becoming another rock magazine. I hadn't really wanted to go down that road. So this was a debate that I had with the editor at the time, and I finally said, okay, let's do it. And it really kind of opened the door for us being a little more free in terms of what we covered and how we covered things. And now, of course, indie rock, you can't see the line between a Steve Aoki set and a Mike Snow show. I mean, it's all kind of the same world. But at that point, indie rock had not become dance rock, and it was still kind of its own thing. Early cover with Diplo, who's, of course, one of the hottest artists out there right now. This was at least 6 years ago, his first cover, and that's Boom Bip. Block Party, another act that we're supposed to go somewhere. The lead singer's out there with a new one, but they kind of, I don't know what happened to them. Next 100 issue, we did this for 14 or 15 years. We did the Next 100. MIA, of course, we know what happened to her. We didn't do her first cover, that was Fader, but we did early covers with her. Common, we did a double cover. We had Common on one cover, and then we had David Banner right there on the cover. David Banner on the other cover, and the whole thing was about looking at whether hip-hop had gotten to the point that it was taking itself so seriously that it would not appreciate, because this was before like Southern Atlanta style music was fully accepted. It was still being debated whether it was good or not, at least outside of the South, and whether it was all about kind of like the intellectual hip-hop of Common or the at least seemingly non-intellectual hip-hop of David Banner or Mike Jones at the time, and we kind of took that to task and discussed that. DJ Shadow on one of his many Herb covers. We've had a lot of DJ covers or DJ focus covers. Of course, you got A-Track, Tommy Sunshine, and Cascade. All three of them, this was 2006 or so, all three of them are quite successful, and in fact, bigger than they were then, of course. This was a cover that we shot with the Dipset crew. We shot it in Harlem, and it was definitely a bit of a departure because it's kind of, it looks like a Source magazine cover. And we definitely got some flack for it, but we really loved where they were coming from. We loved their whole vibe. We spent the day with them in Harlem, and Joel Santana, and we kind of learned like how he just, was the mayor, and it was cool. This was, as we started to kind of expand coverage and design, this was a year after Katrina. We did a whole package on Katrina. We had we started having richer approaches to editorial stuff that wasn't just about music, because obviously the blogs were doing that so well that we didn't want to just repeat what blogs were doing. We were expanding into talking about movements and scenes, and then, politics or communities like New Orleans, which was obviously close to me. This was an issue that we did called the Conflict issue. Had two covers. We had Perry Farrell and we had Immortal Technique. We actually shot them, and we had them come to the studio together. And I wish I had the shot of it, but the most uncomfortable like meeting of the two of them, because if you know Immortal Technique, he's a real firebrand. Like he's about like, South LA farmer power, and he's a hardcore dude. And then of course Perry Farrell is the opposite. But we put them together, and we did this great dual cover with the two of them. Next 100, this was, I'm disappointed with all three of these cats. Kid Sister, Flostradamus, they kind of let us down a little bit. But we took chances always with the Next 100s. And you can see, this was 2007, obviously. And then, but we definitely put a lot of people on. Amy Winehouse, that probably was very, very, very early. She should have been on the cover, clearly. Wu-Tang, this was an illustrated cover we did, a conceptual cover of Wu-Tang. our hip-hop issue. This was a first. We always try to avoid like doing the women's issue because we just felt like that's kind of patronizing, but we really did come up with some what we thought was some really cool pieces, female empowerment and just kind of women really doing it. It's a beautiful issue, and we actually didn't get Lauryn Hill to sit down for an interview. We tried in vain. We thought we had her, and then last minute she got weird, and we ended up just writing this whole piece, you know, on our own, and we wrote a really good piece. But she was not a quote in there, which is what a lot of magazines do all the time, but it wasn't what we usually did. Not the best execution of a really, I think, a good pairing for the cover. Perez Hilton, Beth Ditto. Perez was putting on artists like Beth. He was just becoming Perez Hilton in a big way. To us, he was still kind of punk. He was this outwardly gay blogger that was like taking on the establishment. Beth Ditto, of course, you know, the Gossip lead singer, is awesome. Punk, appeared on NME like a couple months later, just pretty much nude. But we got so much flack. People really hated this cover. Perez, you know, put it on his blog, and we got tons of traffic on the site. But man, people like thought we had really jumped the shark. But it was a good issue. It was a great, you know, DIY issue. We had a lot of really cool stuff inside, but it's a challenge. Anyway, Coachella issue. I only did this once, but we're really proud of it. We did an oral history of Coachella. We worked with the festival and covered the festival for the whole 10 years or 11 years it's been going on. And we really kind of covered all the bases of at least that year and kind of really looked back too. This is our 15-year anniversary cover where we obviously got a bunch of artists together and kind of shot them all in the studio in Manhattan. A lot of them are still in the mix. And then we were starting over the last few years to kind of break out and do some, obviously, you know, working with fonts and typography and really kind of, this is B.O.B., his first cover, and getting more abstract. We're not putting cover slugs on it. We started working with this design group called the KDU and really approached it in a much more avant-garde manner. And I think it, you know, it helped us in the kind of the years when things were waning with print to kind of reapproach who we were. And this is Jay Electronica and Erykah Badu. And that was the opposite of the one cover. And then recently, fast forward a little bit, this is something we did for Coachella. This is post us last issue that we printed in fall of last year. We did this in spring of this year, a magazine strictly for the campers at Coachella. We did 15,000 copies of this. It was something Coachella had never done. It was a totally custom built publication from the ground up. And super well received, and we hope to do it again next year, which is one of the things we're getting into. And I think that's about it. Yeah, so what's next? Which is where Josh comes in and asks me really great questions.
Thank you, Raymond. First question I want to know is, do you still have that living room hi-fi you were playing when you were like?
I wish I had. I wish I should put up all that stuff in a museum. It'd been great.
Kept it. Could you maybe talk us through the moment where, or when was the moment as you were publishing? You've been publishing for 15 years or so, or more.
In total, since the beginning?
Until the moment when the web got in the way.
Got it.
And so when was the moment?
Until the moment it got in the way, or until the moment we noticed?
Yes, well, that too. So like, what after having a successful run as a print magazine, with a pretty solid niche in terms of
for a while,
was, for a long time,
yeah.
Where you had a rare opportunity in a even then oversaturated music magazine marketplace, you were able to actually say, this is what we're about, that's different from The Source, from Spin, from Rolling Stone, from et cetera, et cetera. And then once the web starts to take off, of course, niches become everything.
Yeah.
And could you just maybe walk us through, if you can even remember, the incremental history of like, something's changing?
Well, you know, initially, like, people go, how do you even have the domain we have? It's urb.com, urb.com, and if you know anything about domains, I mean, that wouldn't be anything you can get today. You would have to have had a 3-letter word like that for a long time or paid a lot of money for it. Like, we've had our domain since the mid-90s. Like, we weren't we used to even have it served on Real Audio, and then my editor at the time says, you know, you should register that for yourself, and so I did. And so we weren't late to the internet party. We were, you know, 95, 96, we started tooling around and working to put together a website. That was around the same time that the guy started Pitchfork in his bedroom, I think. But it wasn't until, you know, 2000 or so that we started to really get a real plan together. And still, we didn't fully invest ourselves into it. We built a site. You could see those pages being built. We were putting content up. Most of it wasn't original content, but so the early 2000s, we started to take it a little more seriously, and it seemed like every year we were like, okay, this is our year for the web. This is our year for doing stuff. But I started to notice it in terms of, you know, it followed my evolution, I guess, to be more accurate. In the, you know, the Friendster days of 2002, 2003.
Some of us call them glory days.
Yeah. I saw a post the other day on Facebook. Someone says, I miss MySpace, you know. And they're like, yeah, they missed, you know, what's this blue and white? It's like, I want colors again. I want unicorns. But that could be what brings MySpace back, you know. Could be what.
Unicorns.
Well, maybe not the unicorns. No sparklies. But, you know, getting into social media myself kind of got me more comfortable with it, and I started to see, you know, I wrote a couple of pieces in the magazine, a couple of editorials, you know, wow, this internet's a crazy thing. This thing's wild. And, you know, but I couldn't really see the writing on the wall. Because we were, every year we should have done more on the web. We started to make more money in print and in marketing. I mean, that's just the problem with every magazine that's out there, you know. We recovered from 9/11, and then it just grew every year. And so most magazines become entrenched, and they don't, I mean, the newspaper's the same way. I mean, newspapers had every opportunity to become digital. From the 80s, there were technologies around. But why would they ever abandon the model that worked for them and got them paid to go to do something that just wasn't going to deliver? And that was kind of the same thing. So, but really, it was the rise of everything like Pitchfork. It started to, you know, we realized that, wow, Pitchfork was unstoppable and was growing faster than even the big magazines like Rolling Stone and Spin. We saw blogs like, you know, The Hundreds or Cool Hunting or Hypebeast, all those, you know, really. And we knew that it was okay because we still were making money, but we knew that the barn door was open. So if you really look in hindsight, 2000, I mean, and really in 2000 or so, everything started to change. And, you know, I said in my editorial that I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post about the post-print realities and what I thought about, you know, kind of shuttering the physical print magazine. And I said that if we had the web back when Irv started in 1990 or, you know, 91, I would have started a blog, I'm sure. I would have started a, you know, web video channel or something. Irv wasn't about doing it on paper so much as it was about being in touch with our audience and writing about stuff in the way we wanted to write about it uncompromisingly, or as much as we could.
That's so interesting, because I'm trying to think
What
about
part?
Like, that you would have started a blog.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in love with print. I mean, I liked print because that's what we had.
Right.
But I would have seen the potential of what could be done electronically, and there would have been no way that I would have said, like, if you look back through our 158, you know, issues, there isn't one story in there that we wouldn't have wanted to make a video out of or something. And there isn't one story that we wouldn't have wanted to have a conversation with people about, you know, two-way kind of conversations. So all of those things were not possible in print. So at the very least, we would have had a very robust digital component to what we would have done. But I mean, yes, the feel and the touch and the tactile nature of print is something I'm still in love with.
Well, I was reacting as much to that, I guess, as I'm wondering, I'll pose it as a question. Do you think that the impetus to start a magazine in 1990 is the same impetus to start a blog in 2010? Or are they the same thing? Do they come from the same place?
Well, they do come from the same place, I believe, but I also believe that you don't have to, in order to start a magazine, you have to not only feel you have something to share, but you have to feel that it's worth it to really build a podium for it, you know? We all feel today that we have something to share, and we do. We do it constantly, right? So it's not, you know, how do you separate just the random share versus somebody really trying to make a statement? So I don't know if it's just like starting a blog. Yeah.
Hip-hop came up a lot.
Oh, and let me say another thing, too. Back when we started Herb, there wasn't anything, you know? That's probably the big point. There really wasn't anything. So it's not only like we were starting it for us, we were starting it for the movement, you know? I had come through 80s graffiti, all through, you know, watching kind of LA become this graffiti mecca, and then watching New York get the books, the movies, everything. LA had nothing. We had badly done videos on LA graffiti, which I'm in one. And yet I didn't want to see that happen with all this underground music. And I was like, okay, well, you know, it's not going to happen. So I'm going to do my part. We're going to make this great magazine that celebrates it. So from the first issue, we didn't have a thrown together ragtag mag. We had a nicely presented mag that was built like big mags were, as much as we could. And that's, you know, there was a mission because there wasn't anything.
Because hip-hop came up so much and is a huge part of the story, like, in some sense, did hip-hop invent Web 2.0? What's been the influence of hip-hop, you think, on the current media moment?
I wish hip-hop played a bigger role in it. I mean, definitely the blogs, the hip-hop blogs, answered the vacuum that mags like Herb left, and, you know, The Source and everything, Double XL, and all the indie stuff and more underground stuff that, you know, stopped being covered, you know, in some ways in the immediacy and how long it took. But I wish that hip-hop played a better role in because it doesn't, you know, because at the end of the day, I mean, hip-hop is still, you know, the roots of it are still the hood, and, you know, the hood is not quite there yet on the internet. I mean, it is in a lot stronger ways than it was 5 years ago. So I really think it's still, you know, the early adopters that kind of jumped to the web, I think were on a level of kind of thinking about culture with a little bit more, it was an approach that was, I don't even want to say it was on a higher level, because it wasn't necessarily, but it was more about communication and technology and forward thinking, whereas hip-hop is much more visceral in the moment, and hip-hop uses the web, I think, as a tool to spread hip-hop, whereas I think the early adopters to the web, I think were doing it as much of a pushing the envelope of technology and communication. Music was a secondary component of it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I asked it also just because I sometimes think about like something like eBay or even the way that sharing has now become a kind of dominant media practice.
Yeah.
And I think about early days of hip hop.
Yeah.
Of, you know, Too Short selling, you know, tapes out of the trunk of his car.
Yeah.
Or record pools among DJs who are always kind of combining sharing and selling and swap meet culture and all that stuff.
Right.
Which in a way the web has done a kind of digital version of.
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of ways, and as you say, hasn't produced too many dividends for the cultures that maybe it connects with.
Well, and also I think there were just some things that were built into hip hop that were not, that didn't play as nicely with the web, right? You had hip hop was concerned about piracy, you know, more so than other musics, and obviously the web was a place where pirates hang out, and you know, hip hop was, or the web was, you know, nerdy. I mean, the web and hip hop ain't nerdy. I mean, it wasn't nerdy. It's nerdy now, but it wasn't nerdy, and that's actually a great thing. It became nerdy, and that's it's good. I mean, it's good that element, but you got to think for the first 15 years from 1990 to mid-2000, hip-hop was not nerdy. So the web wasn't going to be something that it would gravitate towards. And the web was about technology and access and all these things that weren't. There's a lot of people that were in the world of hip-hop that, were connecting to it through the web early on, but in terms of just the real force of the web, it's the other stuff, I think.
So once you shifted from print to a full commitment to herb.com,
yeah.
Could you maybe talk us through about what happens in that shift? What did you have to rethink from doing this object to this other thing?
Well, I mean, it's a fundamental dismantling of everything. You have to rethink your revenue because that all changes. You can't just go from producing a magazine to producing a website and have the same staffing, the office, all that kind of stuff. That all changes. And you can't just do web stuff. You have to do other stuff, marketing and custom publishing and all these other types of projects and whatnot. So it was as far as the mental, it was about letting go of the control that print allows. Print is like this. I mean, once those plates, the printing press is like all set and ready to go, boom, it's done. You print in that sucker. It's not malleable. This issue is from 2009, and it won't change, right, for the next decade until it evaporates or something. But the web is constantly changing, and there's, if I make a mistake in my editorial, I can't change it. But also there's a certain level of what comes with that is this then becomes a piece of, this is like a tablet, this is like ancient scripture, and no one else can kind of if you're not on the cover, well then you're never going to be on the cover of this magazine, yet on a web page, well, you're the cover tomorrow as long as they upload your photo. So you have to get out of that mind state that it's precious. This is so much more precious than the web, and you have all people in print, all people that did newspapers. It's funny because now I see them, I'm kind of like the I see dead people kid, because when I talk to people that are in print media, I see their skeletons and stuff. If they think in the old way, it's not that they can't be successful, but I see them when they talk about it in a certain way, you go, man, you got to let that go. It's all about, you really have to let it go, and it just, I learned it from blogging. I started writing on the Huffington Post, and I've been heavily into social media. And all of that, seeing what that was versus what I did here, it made me appreciate the rarefied nature of print, but it made me also not see print as any sort of communication tool beyond, that kind of narrow niche that it accomplishes so well now, and see the web for everything else. So it's more of a mental thing.
Do you think it's changed the way your writers are writing?
Well, yeah, because that started to change like a decade ago, really. Because all of the first exodus, and this was maybe one of those first things that we started to notice. I mean, the first exodus was all of the writers that we could afford back in the 90s, in the 2000s, started getting jobs at Vibe, and when Russell Simmons launched 360 Hip Hop, which I'm sure no one remembers, that pulled people in, and all of the .coms that were in the early 2000s or late 1990s, pulling people in. So we couldn't afford some of the same writers, and they started, if they wanted to write with us, they wrote for a lot less money. And
you guys always paid your writers?
For a lot of the print side of things, only up until the recent years where things were really tough. But, in the 90s and 2000s, yeah. I mean, the earliest issues, no. But all through kind of the mature issues, yeah, we paid writers. And, but never on the Rolling Stone level, which is like $2, $3 a word or something. But so writers today, I think the threshold for becoming a writer is just, booting up your computer. And so the quality wanes or, fluctuates. And the way that people write, they chase, they want their stories to get picked up and linked, and the way they write headlines, all of that stuff is, it's kind of changed the way people communicate, right? You have to you have to write a piece that Google can see with their little crawlers, and you have to write a piece that looks good in a Google Reader, and headlines that fit. And we have this one writer in New York who is not about the web. He does a lot of web video on YouTube, but he writes headlines that are like paragraphs, and none of them, they're all esoteric. And I'm like, okay, like nothing will ever see what you just wrote. There's no tags. He doesn't tag the articles. It's like writing in a vacuum. Once it sinks below the blog roll, it's.
Can you back up maybe
sorry.
2 steps and explain to everyone what the crawling in terms of Google?
Oh yeah. Well, just Google has. It's constantly searching the web, and it has these little spiders, I think they're called, right? And they're crawling around the web, and they pick up keywords and sentences and the way sentences are put together, and especially headlines, and they figure out where to put stuff and how to rank it in its importance. And the importance is based on other stuff too, and I'm telling you like I know because Google does not share this information. It's called an algorithm, and they don't share it, and obviously I don't know what it is, but the general stuff is that it's how things are written. They have to be written in a certain way. The Google is, you don't have to necessarily tell Google what's in your page. A tag, right? You all tag your posts usually or whatnot. You put all your index what's in the post. If it's graffiti, elevators, whatever, the major things that you might search on. Google doesn't really need you to do that because they're already tagging your piece. But it may be they may not get to it because they're crawling the entire universe of the internet. So it may be a day before they get to your page or something. Whereas if you tag it, it might get picked up immediately on a Google search or whatnot. And then headlines are just as important. Do you all use Google Reader? Do you mess with that? Yeah. So on Google Reader, it's basically an index of all of your blogs and sites that you follow, and like our editor doesn't really go to sites anymore. He doesn't go to, and this is, it's funny, now the blogs almost have to realize that the thing is now changed on them, and which is a very interesting area that we should get into at some point. But I'm watching blogs go through the same thing that we went through in the early 2000s, resistant to change, entrenched in, the guys that, I won't mention any blogs by name. But, guys at some of these blogs are making so much money from the traffic in their blogs that they don't want to develop anything for this because they have no idea how to make money here. They don't want to, video doesn't make them money. All these things that could advance what they're doing. I'm not sure how I got on that, but anyway, the way that Google kind of reads or the way the Google Reader reads your blogs is just through headlines. So if you're not, your page could be beautiful, but it may never be seen. If your headline is not right, if someone's following Hypebeast and the headline is weird and it says something like, such and such artist backflips and does a cameo, I don't know what that means. Instead of, Jay Electronica joins Erykah Badu on stage. That's a headline that people will see in Google Reader and go, click. Something less than that, they may never click it. Because most people aren't going to blogs. A lot of people still are, but the trend is moving away from that. The trend is moving away from the openness of the web into things like Google Reader. If you have an iPad and you look at some of the apps that are coming out, there's a number of them that just read your Google Reader. And they're just RSS readers and stuff, and they just put your Google Reader lists. So I go to mine, and it's got, 30 or so blogs, and that's not even a lot, but like 30 or so that I can just pull headlines from on a daily basis without ever going to them unless I click. And then even then, you're looking at it within the framework of the reader, not necessarily even going to the page. It gets interesting. Sorry, that's part of it,
I'm also thinking about, like, as a writer,
yeah,
how, for like just one example of how this has also changed,
yeah,
versus headlines on the editorial side or on the publishing side. So often if you're writing for a newspaper or a magazine that exists online,
yeah,
the first thing that your editors are worrying about, beyond the fact that it's a good story,
how many people will link to it?
How many people are linking to it?
The link economy, is what they call it.
The most emailed bracket on the side of New York Times or LA Times, which is great if your articles are emailed a lot because it feels really good, and it sucks if you're not.
Yeah.
And so often now it becomes about how many, recruiting friends to click on your article and that kind of
thing. They tell you, if you write for the Huffington Post, which the minute you write, you get an email from the Huffington Post, and they go, okay, now you have to get to work. I'm like, I just wrote. That was work. No, now you have to tell people that you wrote it. And the next day, or the next 24 hours is the most important time that you've got to like tweet about it and do this and dig it and submit it to Stumbled Upon and all these things. I mean, it's a chore. And there's automated things sometimes that you can do some of that, but yeah, because you really do have to promote, or else people wonder like who gets on the front page of the Huffington Post or who gets seen, because you think that's all that's on the Huffington Post. No way, there are thousands of pieces on the Huffington Post. They're just buried. You just have to get a direct permalink to it, but the pieces themselves are just buried somewhere in the post, and they only get there if someone, enough people click it, and it becomes kind of a.
So has publishing become just another version of a popularity contest?
Yeah, I mean, it really has. Sadly, that is a byproduct of it. But that I say sadly, that is the reality. But that is the exchange for having everybody in here have the ability to put something online, and get it potentially as visible as. I'm a 20-year veteran of magazine publishing. My piece doesn't necessarily go any further than anybody else's here today. Now, people that run Newsweek and Time, that disgusts them. They hate that. They won't say that, but they hate it. And I just think it's made the best ideas surface. I mean, that's how it should be, really. But it is a popularity contest of sorts. There are smart ways to kind of go about it, and it's a shame when it just becomes, you're just seeing headlines kind of written for that, but you've got companies like Demand Media, which is a large kind of a media farm, a content farm they call them, which is paying writers cut rate dollars to just write pieces. I haven't really even seen the kind of stuff they write, but I imagine it's about everything, any kind of content you could think of, and it's pennies on the dollar that they're getting paid, which is more than a lot of people get paid to write for blogs, which is nothing. But and then they're selling those content feeds to sites. That's the not so great side. The great side is that there are thousands and thousands of brands and entities that are coming online every day that need content and need a way to communicate. And if people who are in journalism, whether it be music journalism or anything, can kind of move into learning how to play within this new arena of who they're creating content for, and not think in a pure, you can't be anchored to the way it was done in the past. The reason I don't really empathize too much with exactly what the newspapers and magazines have gone through, myself included, is because newspapers and magazines only ran the show because they were the gatekeepers. I mean, the stairs were too high to climb for the average person. It's not like every magazine or newspaper out there deserved to be the only voice, right? I mean, the people who run the newspapers, I mean, my God, if you look at the history of the newspapers, how exclusionary they were, how racist they were, how classist they were. I mean, these are not good people that, founded the LA Times and all these places. No offense to anybody who works for the Times, but is this on camera?
Well, the LA Times of yore.
Yeah,
yes.
Of course, not today, but I'm just saying, like, the origins of, like, the newspaper was not, it was about driving home a certain message to keep certain people down or fight labor or do whatever. So, it's, I think the democracy of it all is a really good thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned a word that I've been waiting when to bring it up into this conversation, but it's a word that has a lot of relevance and interest by students and by faculty here, which is brand. And I'm wondering if you could, I know that
it's a word with like thorns and spikes and
thorns, but people hug it, but also refer to it. Obviously, branding is not new in this particular moment. It's been around for quite a while. Branding's been a big part of.
And there's been a generational shift in terms of how we are even perceived.
Exactly.
My generation versus your generation. I mean, Gen X, like, we hated brands. Like, we were brand phobic. I wrote about it in early issues of Herb, insulting, these companies that kind of I felt were just snatching the culture. Like, back in the 90s, Sprite had this hip hop campaign that I hated. and I wrote about it, and I called like people who join those types of companies. I mean, I think I wrote like step and fetch it, which is a very insulting term in black culture. But it was, but it's different today because brands, I mean, look at the X Games. I mean, no one seems to care. The guy wins, does some trick, and boom, he's got like a logoed head. And it's all fine because people have accepted that that's part of the communication economy,
There's that, Sprite has a record label now, right?
Well, and then we ended up helping to launch Scion, which is one of the best examples of and we I did everything that I kind of was insulting the people in the 90s for doing. We like, here, meet these graffiti artists. Here's how you hire a DJ. And then it was pretty much hand-holding. But that was a means to an end because at the same time as we were kind of bringing Scion into the conversation with their audience, we were booking Biz Markie to DJ, Grandmaster Flash, paying graffiti artists that were struggling to like get paid gigs, giving them thousands of dollars to go design a car, doing art tours. I mean, we literally Scion ignited an entire cottage industry, and they still have it. They're still running it, and we opened a gallery. We did a lot of things that helped independent businesses and entrepreneurs and artists and creatives continue to do what they do without necessarily having to go get that day job. So that was when it kind of started to balance out a little bit more than just kind of siphoning cultural stuff. And
I mean, there was a piece in the New York Times, I think yesterday, the day before,
yeah,
about Converse, about the role that Converse is now playing. They have their own recording studio.
Oh, yeah.
Converse is reaching out to indie artists and bringing them and helping them to record tracks. And
yeah, we did that with Scion AV. Dakar. Do you know Dakar? Right, it's a couple people might know Dakar. It's a hip hop orchestra. Sorry to cut you off.
No.
Okay, it's a hip hop orchestra. They're from LA, but there's like 40 people, yeah, right?
The most
translation: no future getting signed. Period. Label watches you come. It's like a clown car, And but Scion took these guys to South by Southwest. You know how much that cost? I mean, and they did a great show, and we recorded it with cameras on 3D. I mean, it was amazing. And so a lot of these brands are, I think, they took cues from Scion.
Yeah. They're taking cues from Scion and all of them are in a way doing what labels to some degree
yes,
used to do.
Absolutely.
Which is reach out and invest in artists. Now what they did with those investments is another story. But that they were offering.
They bought big tables like this.
Exactly.
You don't want to know what happened next.
And more, especially indie artists who can't get signed to labels,
right,
who aren't getting support to go on tour, can't have no revenue streams whatsoever. Brands are stepping up to say, in a sense, let's work together.
100%.
We'll help you. You help us. You give us cred. You give us street cred. You give us indie cred, and we give you support.
And more importantly than just credibility, they give the brand something to talk about. I said it at South by Southwest. I mean, I kind of on a panel about whether how do you keep your credibility in working with brands, and brands need to talk. That's what they do through advertising. Well, advertising obviously is not happening on the same level anymore. So how do they talk now? They talk through culture and through having something to say that's relevant to their audience, the youth. And music is obviously one of the best ways to have a communication. So it's making them cool, but it's going a step further. It's actually media, which it wasn't so much in the 90s, but now since media is literally everything, the brands use it as media too. Yeah.
I mean, when you started Herb, the idea that an artist associated with anything like hip hop, electronic music, right, rave culture, that before their record dropped and was for sale, had already licensed half their record to
yeah,
Miller Genuine Draft.
Yeah.
They would not. They would lose all their audience.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think. I'm sure some people in this room might feel that there's still a credibility loss with that today, but I don't know that.
Much less so, I think.
Much less so. Like, Moby broke a lot of barriers for that. If you look back at the history, when he came out with Play, it got, I mean, he retired off of that pretty much. And
Every
American
song,
Express, every song, it's still out there being heard. TV shows, right? It educated an entire advertising industry. They basically picked over the carcass of that album, like Carry On, you know? I mean, they got every little piece out of their teeth. Recently, it was I was going to call it Santigold. I mean, which I love that album. But I hate that commercial that's got it in it now, the Bud Lime or whatever it is. But, you know, she was smart. I mean, she had to do it. And she's a record industry vet, so she's not just some young artist coming up. She kind of knew how the game was played. I recently heard my favorite song of the year, one of them is Mike Snow's Sylvia, and it's in a commercial for Buick. I tweeted about it yesterday saying, oh, like, I love that song. Why Buick? You know, why Buick? And no offense to Buick, but why Buick? And someone hit me back on Twitter, and they said, I don't fault any artist for, you know, trying to get paid to pursue their art. And I'm like, you know, I don't either. Truthfully, I really don't. I was just bummed that, like, that Buick, that song and Buick.
Do you think it's changing the way people are making not just music, but visual art even? I mean, this happened big time with street artists and, you know, graph culture. I mean, do you think that it's making people want to make art that is more brand ready?
Oh, yeah. Oh, completely. And that's something like you may not see it as much if you're like in your 20s is, you know, you're older like me, you see it because you remember when music didn't sound like every commercial. You know, music in the 90s did not sound like the WB or whatever, you know, station, and it was like today, you know, music sounds like everything on TV and The Hills, and it's all, I listen to songs and I have a visceral reaction to them sometimes, and I say, wow, that sounds like it's for a sitcom. And it makes me kind of disturbed, even though you know, that is just being a little prejudiced about the music, but that's what I think. That wasn't the case. So absolutely, people are making stuff to get it licensed, hopefully. I know that's the case, yeah.
Also, a lot of the music supervisors on shows are KCRW.
Exactly. So.
Well, they are. KCRW is a farm team for music supervision, and that stuff does work. And the way that it kind of, and they've been doing that for years, right? You know, since they are great, and they're cultivating a sound that you hear on a show, like a Krista Riedis or something, or Eliza Richardson, and making a movie with a soundtrack. That absolutely sounds like their show, of course. So. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but yeah.
So I'd like to open it up. I've asked
a
question. But curious what you guys think. Any comments or questions for Raymond or about any of this world?
Or if you want me to show any of those photos again, I can.
Oh, that'll happen.
Well, one of the things I was thinking is that going from just being a regular person and becoming a magazine producer and publisher is to me 10 times or 100 times harder than starting a blog. You know, it's, and the stairs up are so easy these days.
Yeah.
It seems like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is. I think it's better training. I think by starting a magazine, I learned how to be a businessman. And I don't necessarily think you learn that by starting a blog. I had to go meet with printers. I had to go into an office. I had to hire, fire, get yelled at by advertisers, all those things that like I had to do. Very real world. And there's the me that graduated high school that was, you know, creative, kind of a troublemaker, you know, eclectic tastes. But I didn't sit in front of people and give talks. I mean, 20 years later, I mean, I've given, you know, 100 talks or hundreds of talks, and I have a different, that all was groomed from starting a company. So yeah, it is different.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what you think as far as looking forward. Do you see things as continual progression, or do you think, you know, what is the place of sort of regression for certain things? I don't know, like your genes.
Yeah.
You know, like what is the place of traditional forms? Do you see opportunities for resurgence or just residual effects? Or, you know?
Oh, yeah, you're talking about like vinyl.
I mean, vinyl.
You had a Dr. Vinyl subhead.
Oh yeah. That was when I learned that like who was it? Jazzy Jeff was using Serato, and I was like, well, it's over. Like, it's done. And they just closed Fat Beats in New York and LA. Yeah, I do think that you know, everything's individual ultimately, right? So if something has a certain level of, most of the times the death of something is reported too soon. You know, that's just one of those givens, right? And so I think depending on the merits of the individual, you know, the essence of what it is. I mean, music is a prime example, of course, not just the physical nature of music with vinyl, you know, having some of its best years when vinyl has no reason being sold at this point. Like, I have at least 5,000 records in my garage, which I have no idea what to do with. They are stuck in a time and place that they don't translate to modern society. I can't drag them out to play them. I'm not going to rip them all to make MP3s. And if I really want all the music, I mean, I can get it for free on, you know. So, but people still like the feel of it. People still like the feel of if you look at the music today and then look at a band like Joy Division, it's just, like, a lot of those are just, they're just copying a band from 30 years ago. And because there was something in the way that band approached it. Graffiti art, the rawness, I mean, stencil art like Banksy, you know, stencil art has something that hasn't, it's evolved, but at the same time, it's still beautiful in its kind of the way it was years ago, decades ago. So I think it depends on the craft, depends on the piece. It's not, you know, I used to think that, like, I get literally sad thinking that the dominoes would just continue to fall. Yeah. Like, technology, boom, boom, oh, turntables are gone, oh, this is gone. I mean, seriously, I would like get hearts, you know, struck about it. Like, and then you notice, no, it actually doesn't. Like, because there's always someone out there that keeps it alive, and you know, you would have thought magazines were gone. I mean, but I swear, go to the newsstand. Go to Borders, you know, go to the Grove and look in the Barnes and Nobles or whatever that store is there, and gorgeous magazines. Some of the most beautiful magazines are being created today. Why? I don't know, because people still really love to make them, and some people love to buy them.
And also, I think one other way to answer the question, or another route, is that it's not even one way for the refurbishment of the kind of old media to become new again, is that the old media becomes the language of new media. So, like, if you look at Zinio as an app, as a, you know, the digital magazine reader on the iPad, there isn't, at least so far, there's very little. A few magazines, National Geographic and a few others, are actually inserting a lot of robust multimedia stuff.
Right.
But a lot of them are just really beautiful digital versions of print.
Sure, exactly.
And so that the way that we read print and our experience of print, that's not gone yet. People, I don't think, have outgrown that sensory interaction to some degree, that we're recreating it still in some cases. Yeah,
I just think it's going to take a place. I think, you know, I still love magazines. I definitely don't buy as many, though. You know, I take a lot of photos of covers and then go back and look at them online for free, not just to save the $4.99, but also so I don't have another stack of magazines in my house. But you know, we're about to put all of Herb's issues on Google Books. And yeah, I haven't actually told anybody that, so this is an announcement. Yeah. Well, I've been working on it for a good chunk of the year by basically writing to Google, filling out the little thing online, and then thinking no one will ever read this, and coming up with better and better stories for why they should pick Herb. And then one day I just got an email, and I met with Google in New York City on my last trip, and they're like, all right, we're ready to do it. They're about to open up the service, you know, to kind of anyone, but it will probably then be a backlog of, you know, because there's 20,000 magazines and different titles out there. That's just U.S. magazines, you know. But that'll be great. So by next year, for our 20-year anniversary, you'll be able to see any page on any Herb ever made, and I can't wait for that. Searchable. Zoom in on it, and from the ads to the mastheads, like scanned, indexed. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, very exciting. A name for, I don't know, maybe someone's come up with a name for this, but I don't know. There's something that happens when new media uses an old media image or format kind of jokingly, as part of the new media, something like I think was it Mux Tape or
Yeah.
that used had a cassette. So if you make a digital mixtape and you click on the cassette, or those horrible burnable
have you
CDRs that look like vinyl.
Yeah, have you seen Symphonic?
No.
This is, man, I love this site. If you're into old mixtapes, or well, do you know what a mixtape is? If you wanted to get some old mixtape going and hear it, no one has a tape deck anymore, clearly, but you can go to this site. It's just a blog called Symphonic, Simfonik. It's by one of the guys that runs the Discogs, which is the largest kind of eBay of vinyl in the world. And he literally is scanning old mixtape labels and puts the artwork of the cassette, the label looks beautiful on like a white background, and does an MP3 of the mix. And you just click it and play it. And it's phenomenal. Like, it's amazing. Because he's finding these tapes from like 1992, 1993. And, if you're an old school raver, man, you're like in heaven. So.
Yeah. Basically, my question is, if I want to put out content, like, what's the future of that? I mean, I know you were able to put out Herb magazine in print. I mean, blogs came out next.
Yeah.
I mean, you said the landscape of blogs are changing. I mean, the internet is just flooded with blogs. I mean, like, if I want to start my own, basically, if I want to start putting out content, like, how do I do it? Where do I start?
Well, I think it depends on what you want to do in terms of what's your goal. So if you just want a platform, or are you trying to start a business for content? Business. Well, then if I was starting a business, I would definitely try to look a few steps down the road. I would look at, tablets. I would look at mobile. I wouldn't just launch another blog, right? And I would think about how are you going to monetize it, and are you going to give all your content away for free, or are you going to have some way to kind of actually charge for your content? You have to really think long and hard about the business model. Unfortunately, the business model of content, just content, it's still there, but it's been devalued. Content itself has been devalued. So most things go up in value. Content has actually gone down in value, at least in the way that it's traditionally put together. Of course, some people will still pay tons of money for content, but you have to be really the pick of the litter in order for them to want your content versus the person who gives it to them for free. So
where's the value?
Where's the value? If it's not in content? If you look at what's working in terms of what people are paying for on an iPad or on an iPhone, it's functionality. It's not content. It's things that allow you to find the cab in your neighborhood. I mean, $1.99 for that app. It's the thing that allows you to, like, I've paid for a couple of content apps, a handful, and I would pay for more, but the most of the apps I paid for tend to be convenience apps, right? Ones that RSS feeders, and there's like PDF readers and things like that, depending on what you do. So
for gateways to content.
Gateways to content, convenience tools for your life. And the sad thing about it is that the folks that are coming up with those types of things are not sad. I mean, if you're a programmer, it's not sad. They're programmers. I mean, I read the other day there was a guy who started he's a USC graduate. What company did he start? Oh, he started something called SkyGrid. I don't know if you know it. Do you? Well, he's a USC grad. And here, I thought they all came from Harvard. See, congratulations, USC. But he created a business. Now, it is a content thing, but it's none of his content or none of the company's content. It's all an aggregator. So what the SkyGrid allows you to it highlights popular subjects, and you can also kind of customize it yourself, and then it just brings in a nice reader that shows you all that content. So what you're getting there is you're getting the convenience packaging of content that, you can't really see it because I'm not online, but it's a content feed, and $1.99 or something, if you pay for that, that might be something that you could create. It's really tough to just go, people are going to pay me for the thoughts in my head or the interviews that I do. That's a really tough road. And I could probably spend a lot more time talking to you about thoughts, but join the conversation if you want. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to add more value to content now that everything's done?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I do. I think if you think beyond the just two-dimensional printed word and you think about video, podcasting, that's actually a really good question because I didn't really touch on that. But I have a friend that, our friend Noam, who does a podcast series. I think podcasting is a really interesting way to go because it's something that you don't have to worry about people. I mean, work, you can kind of listen to a podcast. You can't really put up a video at work for the most part. It's inexpensive to do now. You can podcast or interview anybody on Skype for free anywhere in the world, and then just turn it into an MP3 file and upload it and have a podcast. Put it on iTunes for free, and you're creating something that the average person doesn't have. So if you've got access, interview Josh, and then make a podcast out of it. Okay, not everybody has access to just interview Josh.
I can't believe you said that in public.
So, I would look at content in different ways. So think about video. Some of the most interesting stuff happening online and the stuff I'm most interested in right now is in video, and I still think that is, even though video there's a ton of video out there. Creating video still has a level of value because it's all right now. Beautiful thing about what's going on in the web, in my opinion, and what a lot of people are writing about is that quality is. You talk about return. Well, quality is actually returning. You would have thought that the natural continuum would have just meant by the year 2020, it'd just be grunts on the web, and emoticons, and that's it. But it's actually, really good, well-constructed quality content is actually starting to come back, and the magazine industry has a future if they don't think of themselves as magazines, but if they think of themselves as content creators and creating innovative content as access holders. I mean, who gets backstage at the VMAs? No one in this room. I don't even get backstage at the VMAs, but a handful of high-level publications and Perez Hilton, So if he's got backstage at VMAs, he's getting the story that no one else can get. So access is still really important, and the quality is coming into play because people are moving away from their infatuation just with the openness of the web, and they're actually wanting things. I mean, this is a completely closed thing, and most people that detract or don't like Apple complain because it is closed, right? It's not open source, but there's a beauty in the fact that it's closed because you don't get. There's not viruses on your iPad. There's not, problems with web pages that just don't load. I mean, everything kind of has to work right in order for the most part, for it to be viewed, at least in the app, as opposed to just viewing it as a Safari, browsing a web page. But if you were actually downloading an actual app, those apps all kind of have to work. So you're taking what is literally, how many websites are there on the web? Billion, right? I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, okay. There's a billion websites, okay? There are 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever. There's under 10,000, I think, apps native for the iPad. Now, there will be, of course, 100,000 by next summer probably. But right now, still even 100,000 compared to like 10 billion potential sites you could go to. I mean, a lot of people are going to, opt for the iPad version in the future. And this is only going to be followed by a bunch of other, package. They call them like walled gardens. That's kind of a term for, not just the openness of the web, but you actually have to register, or you have to have a credit card on file to download an app, things like that. That's actually a threshold, and you go in. So if you can learn how to create stuff that is in this world, that's where there's money. Absolutely, that's where there's money. If you're just creating stuff for the web, unless you get a crap load of traffic to your site, which is very hard and only getting harder to build, and the money for that is only going down, meaning that the cost per 1,000 clicks or whatever is only shrinking, and it's only getting harder to drive that traffic. So you'd be going against the tide to kind of create a blog and hope to make money off of it someday.
And kind of in that spirit.
But don't let that dissuade you.
For what it's worth, and answering the question also, is that as I heard the head of a major ISP say recently, that people aren't aware of it, but we are, especially anyone using apps on their iPhone or on their iPad, but you're paying to use the internet. Most apps, as you say, are not full of original content. They're just getting you somewhere on the web. And so when you're spending, you know, $1.99, $4.99 in some cases, without even blinking, $9.99 for an app that sounds amazing.
Totally.
You're spending $9.99 to access what's free. Now, someone's helping you do something fantastic with what's free.
And it is, and what's free wasn't always free.
Right.
You know, I mean, there was nothing. 1980s LA, nothing was free. If it was free, it wasn't worth anything. You know, the park was free. That sucked. The park sucked. My bike cost me money. You know, my skateboard cost me money. So it's. I just think that the web gave us the false impression that everything was free. And it was free for a minute, but eventually the quality started to suffer, and then people, I think, will. But you're right, in terms of the, you know, just the economy of this all. I have an iPhone and I have an iPad. This, you know, I've probably spent a few bucks on apps over the years, but I would have never bought a $10 app on this thing. I'd be like, what, 10 bucks? What's this going to do? I'll sure buy a $10 app on this thing because, you know, I treat this with a whole different level of respect. It offers so much more than this device. So all of a sudden, kind of overnight, Steve Jobs now has gotten me into a different store. I walked in through the front door of like some discount 99-cent store, and all of a sudden I'm in like whatever, you know, Bloomingdale's, and it's like, and I don't even know it, but it feels better.
I was going to say, taking off the point you just made, I heard an interesting adage about the web that if you're not paying for a service, yours was being sold. In terms of thinking about things as being free.
Well, that's 100% right. I mean, Facebook clearly is that. That's the best example of it. You know, you're being data mined, which isn't so insidious when you think about the insurance companies and the credit card companies have had your buying habits, and they know way more usable stuff about you than Mark Zuckerberg. Everybody who worries about Zuckerberg, you should worry about your credit card company that all of a sudden denies a charge because they think you're spending on a trend that, you know, implies that you may have domestic problems at home. I mean, literally, they are studying you like that. So don't worry about Zuckerberg because he put an ad on the right column that, you know, talks about your affinity for dirt bikes or something. I mean, that's harmless. But you're right. I mean, that's the trade-off. I mean, there was another, you know, interesting article talking about when will the convenience of the web stop being free? When will Twitter, you know, and all these things, if they are all of a sudden, you know, because in a sense, even though they're monetizing it, most of these companies aren't profitable. So the persons who are monetizing that are the venture capitalists, right? And you know, at some point, even they have to get paid because not everything turns into a Google or a Facebook at this point. So, you know, this is really, and this is why Apple, in my opinion, is such an incredible company. It has, with just a device, kind of shifted the trajectory. That a year ago, you could not have really anticipated that this, you know, most people were going to be like, as soon as this was able to just cruise a website and browse just on the web, what they were calling the mobile web, this was going to be anything you ever needed. But in truth, what happened was that Steve Jobs came in and he said, forget the mobile web, I'm inventing, you know, a whole new environment called the iTunes Store, the App Store, where you're not even going to have to like wonder what site you got on. You're just going to shop from my store, and I get 30% of it, which is a good deal.
Yeah. So as you're talking about monetizing, what I'm interested in is where do you see your consumer's threshold for payment? Like where are they? How far are they willing to go, or how much do you think you could get out of them to make a profit for yourself? I know
Right.
That's an awful question.
Well,
It's a true question.
I'm going to find out because I don't know yet. Because I mean, obviously the magazine was selling for $4.99, but it's such a messy model to try to anticipate. Like I couldn't tell you who paid and who didn't pay. Right? Who was that consumer for $4.99? Once we launch in this space, we will have, and this is what we're working on. But I will tell you that one of the mistakes that the magazine industry made is instead of learning how to make their content relevant in a paid environment online, they just tried to copy the web But they had to realize that the web is populated by people that don't have the overhead of magazines, so they can get away with giving it away for free. And the magazines themselves and newspapers kind of devalue their own content. We don't intend to put anything on the iPad that doesn't cost money. And if it means that we put a certain type of stuff that costs $1.99 or $2.99, and it's not just the stuff that's on the web, like music reviews or something kind of that everybody has, then it means that we will probably shift to the things that we do think there's a. But technically, there'll probably be people that will tell you that the same. There are thresholds that probably exist on the app space. If you were asking me about that, $2.99 to $4.99, or I'd say $99 to $4.99 is kind of the comfort zone. Things that go beyond $4.99 start to get into a real question about value proposition. There are $100 apps on the App Store. I don't know if you've really gone through it, but there are $100 there. You can take your what's that big? You can take all the tests, all the what's that big test that the financial people take? MCATs or whatever. Yeah, you can take that on this thing. Yeah, all that stuff for $200. It's crazy. So.
I mean, this came up a lot actually last year in the Courtney Holt working group that we did, where Perry and I think we were representative here, but one of the things that came up in terms of students thinking about a new music consumption website was the price point question about what people were willing to pay for, what the threshold was. And it was so interesting. I remember one early conversation, one student said they would never spend 99 cents on a Miley Cyrus song. Or for that matter, to be fair, they'd never spend 99 cents on a new Jay-Z single, but would, without blinking, spend $20 on the deluxe edition of that Jay-Z album.
Physical.
Physical.
Yeah.
And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I think this is a really
that's
important
certain
question.
people.
Like media companies are this question of the price threshold is a big one because it's a lot about personal taste and.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who really, really don't pay for music have just gotten into a rhythm of getting so much music for free that they don't want to change. I don't really think that there's as much of a price sensitivity to it. I think there's a convenience factor of it. I have a friend who doesn't buy music, but he is such a pro at taking music, and he's from the music industry. That's the thing. You'll find the biggest culprits that take film and music are in the industries. The only people that walk into Amoeba and were selling CDs back in the day worked for magazines or labels. I mean, now it's everybody kind of, but I mean, those were the chief culprits that literally back a truck up, and they'd come from Capitol Records. And so, my friend just keeps a dedicated computer. I think I told you this when we met. He keeps a dedicated computer just to download, a little netbook just to download music all day. But for him, it's that he can't find everything he wants on iTunes. Clearly, the stuff he needs to find is literally only on illegal sites or just a bunch of blogs that are posting it kind of, either for free or quasi-legal. But Steve Jobs, again, with Apple, created something. One of the terms you want to think about is how much friction there is in the transaction. And it's frictionless with iTunes because you can't even turn this thing on without having your credit card on file. It doesn't work, right? And even if you don't want to pay for an app, even if you're only getting free apps, you still have to have a working credit card. So you've already gotten past the threshold of having to pull your wallet out and think about how much you were spending. And then you never really see you do get an email receipt, but it probably goes to a box you don't check or something. So you never really see what you spent until your credit card statement comes. So it's all about reducing that friction. Again, that's why he invented an environment that was enclosed, right? Because you can't create that. Go home tonight and want to give money to feed the children. Find the site. Make sure it's got that icon that means you're not being phished. Are you paying PayPal, credit card? Which card? Do you have enough room on the card? Blah, blah, blah. You got to ask yourself all these questions. There's none of that when you're in an iTunes store. You just click. And that's why iTunes works. That's why they have sold 1 billion tracks or whatever, because it is effortless. He proved that the music, people will pay 99 cents for music if it's easy enough. And there's no one else that can really do that because every other environment is fighting with each other. I mean, Android kind of has it because they've got Google and Android and the Motorola kind of collusion. But most of these other brands are like, you have a Palm phone, but it doesn't talk to this. And, Apple has created an entire environment. So if you stay in the little Apple world, kind of rewards you with frictionless spending, so you can spend money. It's insidious. It is evil.
Maybe one final question? Anybody?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to know, like what's happening for new artists and everything. Like, how are they, how are they gonna? I mean, I feel like it's sad that they're like, they're selling themselves out to brands and stuff. Like, how are they gonna come out? Like, basically, what's gonna happen to record companies? That's also good.
Well, it's funny. Don't be sad. I talk to labels. I have a friend, for example, who was a former Herb intern, and he runs Alpha Pup Records, and Gas Lamp Killer, bunch of like amazing people. Kev probably. Smart dude, right? Has he figured out how to make a label work? Yeah, okay. Well, he's made a living, okay? But he does it because he's got a hybrid of stuff. Music licensing, he's got the club night, he's got the publishing. I mean, you have to be inventive. There are success stories. I mean, labels, there are a lot out there that are surviving and in fact, in some ways, it's a great time if you really know how to play the game in terms of being a label, but you do have to do all of those different types of hybrid things. But that's just the state of the economy. I mean, that's the economy, period. It's not just native to labels. I mean, if you're doing anything today, every charity has to have a way for nano donations, little micro donations, to be a part of how they raise money. If they only accept the $25 and up, I mean, they're in trouble. That's why text $10 or text $5 is. So you have to be, the artist can still, I think it's a great time to be an artist right now. I just don't think you're going to be an artist that is just going to just pull up with an album to a label and all of a sudden get paid and retire. That might be, that's over to a large extent, But does that mean, I mean, what drives you? Not you personally, but you have to ask yourself, kind of what drives you as an artist? How important is it to be, rich or just happy, comfortable enough?
Well, I mean, I'm asking that question just because, I mean, record labels want to make 360 deals. I mean, artists really aren't going to make money. Like, they need to make 2-3 CDs to, like, profit off that, to make some money. I mean, piracy, like, people aren't, I mean, they get paid less for digital downloads, obviously, than, like, they make on selling.
What do you think about the state of music, though, right now, in terms of how good music is right now?
I mean, I think, like, we could be doing a lot more, though, obviously. Like, I feel like people really only know, like I mean, Lady Gaga, like Justin Bieber, huge names, and I feel like there are so many more people that, like, should be in public awareness.
Well, forget public awareness, just in terms of what's out there that you know about. Forget what gets on the radio. I mean, I don't even...
I feel like my head would explode if there was more.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty
I think...
remarkable moment.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about...
Yeah.
I'm a nostalgia freak. I mean, on any given day, I'm listening to the Beatles or Black Sabbath or, like, I'm old school, but I still am blown away by how much great music constantly is coming out. I mean, I'm into a lot of the indie stuff. I'm into, as much as my friend, the same one with the netbook downloads, he gives me, like, gigs of hip-hop stuff that I, like, consume voraciously, and it's amazing. And I think there's tons of great music. So for an industry that is supposedly struggling, I think that the business model, yes, is struggling, but for some reason, artists still feel compelled to go and make their music. They just, again, may have to have another hustle,
I think
and that's how it maybe should be in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, would anybody really want to go back to the 70s and 80s to where music was, everybody got paid? Go back, like you were there. If you could imagine, the 70s and 80s, right? To be there and, like, I mean, read the books, like, what are those famous books about the record industry and stuff? Yeah, Mansion. I mean, it was not a friendly industry for anybody, and it was, misogynist and racist, and they stole from artists, and the artists blew all their money on drugs, and a lot of people put out mediocre crap, we all only hear the really good stuff because that's what the compilations play us. But when you really went back, there was a lot of crap. So is it a better time for music today? I think it's totally a better time. It just, especially if it's the time you're in, it's the time you live in, and it's where your sensibilities are being informed. It's amazing. So forget the model. I don't know if that doesn't matter as much, in my opinion.
Something like a 360 deal, they'll be gone very soon. I think that's pretty much everyone agrees on that. That they're desperate.
It's an interim.
Yeah,
it's a land grab by the companies.
Transparently evil.
Yeah.
And I think even the people offering them kind of do it crying. You know, that they know that it's horrible. But like, I think for every example of, you know, a kind of maybe a lament over the hyper commercialization or whatever of pop music, like you think about like Wonderland Art Society in Atlanta, you know, and you look at a Janelle Monáe,
yeah.
You look at the way that,
totally.
You know, she's working through major multimedia corporate channels. I mean, with Puffy and, you know, going through very corporate channels to do something that is highly, highly collective, that is highly creative, highly inventive, very local.
Look at Diplo. I mean, that camp, that's a smart camp.
Yeah.
That dude is, you know, I mean, he's big BlackBerry commercial just came out with him. They've got all this stuff in the works, and you couldn't get more real in terms of like, you know, just tapping into what's really going on in music. I mean, but they keep it dirty. I mean, the studio that Mad Decent uses in Atwater is just like, you know, it's a down and dirty kind of hole in the wall. But they hustle. They create their own 360 deal just by the way their manager hustles and the way their team kind of hustles. And it's the way that it gets done today. But he's constantly on the road. He's touring. He's getting paid lots of money. The world has shrunk, so where, you know, he can play in Iceland and he can play in, you know, Sao Paulo and get paid and make up for maybe what he doesn't do in just raw sales, you know. So they're definitely still a model, but it is not for the faint of heart. You know, you have to really want it and be creative about it.
Well, I'm excited to see what we all cook up. Those of you who are not a part of the working group, do let us know if you want to be involved. And Raymond, I just want to thank you for this. This has been a great night.
Thanks.